You ever met someone and thought, I can't stand you, but I can't stop thinking about you either? Well, buckle up, because this isn't just another enemies to lovers story. It's a modern-day fairy tale, wrapped in secrets, tension, and one question that won't leave your mind. Why does a man who ruined her life now want to save it? If you clicked on this video hoping for love, betrayal, revenge, luxury, and just the right amount of emotional chaos, yes, you're in the right place. And by the time we get to the truth, the part everyone's waiting for, you'll see exactly why this billionaire enemy was never her enemy at all. Or was he? So lean in, stay close, because the answers are buried deep, and we're about to dig them up together. Let me talk to you for a second, not just as a storyteller, but as someone who knows exactly why you're here. You're not just here to listen to a romance audiobook. You want to feel something real. You're craving that intensity. You want to fall in love with a story that pulls you in, holds you hostage, and makes you forget about the world for a little while. You want chemistry that burns so hot it aches, with characters you can't decide whether to love or hate. That emotional tug-of-war, it's not just entertainment. It's therapy. And this story, this very one, is going to hit you where it matters most. But for that to happen, you need to stay with me until the end. I promise you, everything you're about to hear leads to a twist that'll make your jaw drop. Don't blink. Don't skip. Just breathe and let it happen. It starts with her, Eden Carrington, a woman with fire in her veins and tragedy in her rearview mirror. The kind of woman who doesn't flinch at billionaires or boardrooms because she's already survived something far worse. She walks into that Manhattan tower not looking for love, but war. Her father's company was taken from him, and she knows exactly who's to blame. She's not here to flirt. She's not here to forgive. She's here to take back what was stolen, even if it means going toe-to-toe with a ruthless billionaire who's rumored to have no soul. But here's where it gets messy. He remembers her, not just as an old enemy, but as someone else entirely. Now let's talk about him. Damian Wolfe. Yes, that Damian Wolfe. The name splashed across Wall Street headlines, whispered in penthouses, and written in gold letters on glass towers. Cold, calculated, brilliant, and single for a reason. He built an empire out of nothing. But there's one thing he never talks about: his past. Not his childhood. Not the secret he buried. Not the one person he couldn't forget, even though he pretended to. But when Eden storms into his boardroom with those burning eyes and that voice filled with accusations, everything inside him stays. Something he thought was long gone. Something dangerous. And that's where our story unfolds, not in fairytale castles, but in sleek city skyscrapers, broken hearts, billion-dollar contracts, and stolen glances that weren't supposed to mean anything. Not when they're supposed to hate each other. Not when revenge is on the table. But hate is a way of turning into something else when the truth is more twisted than the lie. And the truth? Well, they both have no idea what's coming. Because somewhere between the arguments, the black-tie galas, the late-night confrontations, and the slow-burn tension, a bigger game is unfolding. One that started long before either of them knew the other existed. This isn't just an enemies-to-lovers trope. It's a power play, a high-stakes romance where every move counts, where desire hides behind danger, and every touch is laced with betrayal. This is about walls being torn down, brick by painful brick. About what happens when the man you're trying to destroy is the only one who truly sees you. About what it costs to finally let someone in, especially when they're the one person you swore you'd never forgive. And listen, I know you've heard stories like this before, but not like this. Because this one, it's personal. The emotional tension isn't just for show. It's rooted in family secrets, buried trauma, whispered regrets, and the kind of chemistry you feel in your chest. You're not just going to witness Eden and Damian's journey. You're going to live it. You're going to question them, root for them, scream at them, and maybe even cry for them. And just when you think you've got it figured out, boom, you'll realize you never saw the truth coming. Right now, you might think you know what the big mystery is. Why is Eden really here? Why does Damian keep her close when he could crush her? Is this revenge or redemption? Is love just another weapon in a war of power and pride? These are the questions that will haunt every moment until the very last second of this audiobook. And trust me, you're going to want to hold on until that second hits. Let me say this clearly. You will get the answer. The one that made you click this video. The one that's already tugging at the back of your mind, whispering, why is she even falling for him? Why does it feel like he's hiding something? What if he's not the villain after all? I've got you, but I'm not handing that answer over easy. You're going to earn it chapter by chapter, heartbeat by heartbeat, all the way to the final reveal. So let's talk about what's really at stake. Not just love, not just power, but legacy. Both Eden and Damien are carrying the weight of generations, mistakes, lies, expectations. Their choices don't just affect them, they ripple through boardrooms, media headlines, and family bloodlines. And when two powerful hearts collide with that much pressure and pain, well, something has to break. Or maybe, just maybe, it turns into something unbreakable. This is a story built for listeners who crave depth, who don't just want a steamy romance but one that matters. If you're someone who rewatches A Proposal, obsesses over Bridgerton, and dreams about what would happen if Succession met Pride and Prejudice, this is your perfect storm. A modern fairy tale with heels, heartbreak, helicopter rides, and yes, hand-holding that actually means something. Because sometimes the most intimate moment isn't a kiss, it's when the enemy sees you fall and chooses not to walk away. Still here? Good. That means you're in this now. You've already chosen a side, whether you know it or not. Maybe you believe Eden's right. Maybe you're hoping Damien has a heart under all that ice. Or maybe, just maybe, you're waiting for the moment they both drop the act and admit what's been burning between them since page 1. Whatever it is, you're about to find out. Because the real story is only just beginning. And as for the secret Damien's hiding, the one that could destroy everything they are building together, ChatGPT said, Eden hadn't planned to return to New York, not after everything that happened 3 years ago. She had left with no intention of ever seeing that skyline again, the one that gleamed with ambition and betrayal in equal measure. Back then, she'd packed a single suitcase, boarded a red-eye to Florence, and disappeared from the world that had taken so much from her. She had traded the cold steel of the corporate Italy for the warmth of sunlit cobblestone streets, painting in quiet cafes and rebuilding a sense of self that had been shattered when her father's name was dragged through the mud. But peace is a funny way of slipping through your fingers the moment you start believing you've earned it. The first whisper came in the form of an email, no name, no subject line, just a single link to a press release announcing Wolf International's acquisition of Carrington Biotech, a company she thought had died the day her father was forced out. And right there, at the bottom of the page, in crisp, emotionless font, Damien Wolf, acting CEO. The name alone triggered something visceral. Not rage, not quite, but the echo of betrayal that never got closure. The headlines at the time painted Damien as a genius deal-maker. Eden saw something else entirely. She remembered the quiet looks he used to give her across the conference room table when their families were still in polite partnership. She remembered the last board meeting before everything imploded, how Damien had said nothing while the shark circled, how he had stood perfectly still when her father walked out with his dignity in shreds. And she remembered, most vividly, that he never once looked her in the eye. That silence cut deeper than anything said aloud. So when the deal resurfaced, and Damien's name was once again tied to Carrington legacy, Eden knew she couldn't ignore it. Not this time. Since her return, she had kept a low profile, at least in theory. She was staying in a boutique hotel in Soho, the kind of place where the concierge wouldn't ask questions if your reservation was under a different name. Her first few days back was spent gathering intel, tracing old contacts, and attending functions under the guise of someone curious about re-entering the corporate world. But behind the calm exterior, she was calculating. Every social encounter was an opportunity. Every champagne flew another step closer to the truth. She knew Damien wouldn't expect to see her, and that was her advantage. Also, she thought. The night before she confronted him in that infamous boardroom, she met with Thomas Greer, a former family friend turned venture capitalist, now deep in Damien's orbit. He hadn't seen her in years and greeted her like a ghost, stammering through small talk while clearly distracted. He mentioned things he shouldn't have, names, timelines, dates that didn't add up. There was something about the way his hand shook when she asked about the acquisition's terms, the way he changed the subject when she brought up the biotechnology division. Eden left that dinner certain of one thing. Something had been buried, and Thomas knew it. But the next morning, Thomas was gone. No call, no email, No trace. The apartment Eden had watched him enter was wiped clean by noon. A realtor's lockbox had replaced the doorman's list. And just like that, the only person who might have backed up her suspicions had vanished. Now, was he avoiding her, or had he been silenced? The question haunted her as she walked into Wolf International's headquarters, armed with documents her father left behind, encrypted drives she had spent nights decoding, and an unshakable gut feeling that none of this was what it seemed. From the moment she stepped into Damien's office, the atmosphere changed. The air felt different, charged, but wrong. His voice was as smooth as ever, but there was something behind it now, like he was hiding exhaustion or guilt, maybe both. He greeted her with a faint smirk, but his eyes flicked too quickly toward her briefcase. Not at her, at what she might be carrying. That was the first tell. The second came minutes later, when he leaned back in his chair, pretending to be amused by her accusations. But his fingers tapped rhythmically against the leather armrest, a tic she remembered from years ago, one he only used when under pressure. He wasn't as calm as he wanted her to think, and that, more than anything, told her she was onto something. But here's where the story starts a blur, because as much as Eden came in with a war plan, she left that office with more questions than answers. Damien hadn't denied anything. He hadn't admitted it either. He spoke in riddles, in veiled references about old partnerships and decisions that had to be made. He called her brilliant and dangerous in the same breath. He told her she was playing a game he thought she'd already lost. But what rattled her most was a parting sentence he delivered with unsettling softness. "You're not the only one with ghosts, Eden." Since then, pieces have begun to shift. A journalist she contacted anonymously went missing from her online feed. A former lab assistant from Carrington Biotech emailed her a vague warning, then deleted the account within hours. And then there was a flower delivery, a single white rose placed outside her hotel room with no note. Just a familiar symbol from a past Eden had tried to forget. Someone wanted her scared. Someone wanted her to back off. But that's not who Eden is. Fear only sharpens her focus. And now, the stakes are no longer about business or family legacy. It's personal. Someone is playing a much bigger game. And Damien, for all his power and wealth, is not as in control as he wants everyone to believe. There's also the matter of Natalie, Damien's sharp, elegant assistant, who always seemed to be in the right place at the wrong time. Eden has noticed her watching, eavesdropping, hovering. And yet, when confronted, Natalie always has a convenient excuse. She's fiercely loyal to Damien, but the kind of loyalty that raises questions. Is she protecting him or protecting herself? Then there's Charles Denton, a board member who's too eager to remind Eden of his long-standing loyalty to her father. The man plays the part of mentor, but his interests always seem to shift based on who holds the most power in the room. And finally, there's the anonymous investor, known only by initials in the company's internal documents, who has been moving money in and out of Carrington's old research patents. Someone with deep influence. Someone hiding in plain sight. Each of these names could be a thread in the unraveling mystery. Or they could be distractions, red herrings meant to keep Eden from seeing the real threat standing right in front of her. But which is it? Damien's behavior only adds to confusion. 1 minute, he's stone cold, issuing legal warnings and pretending she's irrelevant. The next, he's showing up at events he never used to attend, finding excuses to be near her, asking questions that feel more like confessions. Eden wants to believe it's all strategy, that is trying to manipulate her. But there's something behind his eyes, something broken. And for reasons she can't explain, it's that brokenness that scares her the most. She's starting to remember things differently now. Moments she once ignored. Looks that lingered too long. Words he never said, but maybe wanted to. Is it possible that Damien didn't betray her father, but tried to protect him? Could everything she's believed all these years be a lie fed to her by someone else? Or is Damien simply playing her now the way he played her family then? Nothing is clear. Every truth seems poisoned by doubt. Every ally could be a traitor. And every time Eden thinks she's getting closer to the heart of this tangled web, something new pulls her further away. What's worse, her own feelings are starting to betray her. Because despite everything she knows, or thinks she knows, she still finds herself wondering what it would have been like if they had met under different circumstances. If she had known the man before the monster. But she doesn't have the luxury of fantasy. Not now. Not when there's so much at stake. Not when someone is watching her every move. Because the deeper she digs, the clearer it becomes. This isn't just a love story. It's a setup, a trap, and the person holding the strings might not be Damien at all. And just when Eden thinks she's about to crack the surface of the truth, she receives an unmarked envelope slid under her door at midnight. Inside it, a photograph, grainy, time-stamped from years ago. Her father, standing with someone she never expected to see. Damien Wolfe. But here's the twist, her father's smiling. Damien isn't. And in the corner of the photo, something's been scratched out. Who, or what, was edited out of the past? And why are they resurfacing now? The photograph gnawed at Eden's thoughts like a splinter under the skin. Visible, small, but painful enough to keep her awake. She stared at it for hours, turning it over in her hands, studying every faded corner, every smudge of time. Her father looked relaxed in the image, almost proud. Damien, on the other hand, seemed uneasy, his posture stiff, his jaw tight. The background suggested a private estate, maybe a resort, definitely not in New York. It felt like a moment frozen in time that contradicted everything she thought she knew. If Damien had always been the calculated corporate shark, then why was he there, standing beside her father, long before any betrayal unfolded? And more importantly, who, or what, had been deliberately erased from the photo's edge, where the corner had been clumsily scraped out? It wasn't just a tear. It was intentional, like someone had tried to rewrite history. Eden slipped it into her notebook and decided to trace the image's origin. She needed answers, but the city had other plans. The next morning, Eden headed to the archival library on 45th Street, where she had scheduled a private review of Carrington's corporate records from the years just before the acquisition. The assistant on the phone had confirmed the files were pulled, flagged under her old researcher credentials. But when she arrived, the man behind the desk looked confused, rifling through folders and muttering under his breath. "I'm sorry," he finally said, avoiding her eyes. "Those boxes were signed out yesterday. You must have already picked them up." Eden froze. "I didn't." But his system showed otherwise, an early checkout by someone using her name, her credentials, and even her ID copy. Someone had impersonated her and walked off with everything. Not just one or two files, all of them. Decades of merger paperwork, internal memos, even security logs. It was as if someone had anticipated her move and cleaned the slate before she even arrived. She left the library with a sinking feeling in her chest and the nagging sensation of being watched. The city's noise didn't comfort her the way it used to. It just masked danger better. Her phone buzzed as she stepped outside, and a single message appeared from an unknown number. "Stop chasing shadows. You won't like what you find." No name, no return path. Just the words, cold and clinical, yet oddly personal. For a moment, she wondered if it was Damien, trying to warn her off. Or if it was someone else entirely, someone who had far more to lose if she unearthed the wrong truth. Later that evening, Eden tried contacting the only person who might still have access to her father's original research, Dr. Rajan Meher, the lead chemist who worked in biotech with Carrington before vanishing into private consulting. He agreed to meet, but not in any formal setting. He requested a quick conversation in a public park, claiming he no longer trusted enclosed spaces. That was the first red flag. When she met him under a half-dead elm tree in Riverside Park, he looked like a man being hunted. Thin, eyes darting nervously, sweat beading even in the cool night air. "They destroyed everything," he whispered without greeting. "The patents, the trial data, the lab notes. Someone wanted it all gone, like it never existed. I don't know how you're still alive. Eden." She tried to press him for more, but the moment she mentioned Damien, Rajan pulled away. "No, he's not the one you should fear. It's the board. You think you're digging into a rivalry, but this is way bigger than a feud. People died to protect it." Before she could stop him, he slipped a folded napkin into her hand and walked off briskly, disappearing into the crowd. Back at her hotel, Eden unfolded the napkin. Scrawled across it in hasty pen strokes was a date, June 4th, 2019, and 2 words, Caspian Protocol. She'd never heard of it before. A project? A code name? A Black Ops trial? The date didn't match any major event she could remember, but the word Caspian echoed something from her childhood. Her father had once joked about naming one of their secret biotech proposals after the Caspian Sea, a nod to something deep, dangerous, and misunderstood. Could it be connected, or was Rajan simply trying to divert her? Before she could dive into research, there was a knock at her door. Not loud, just strange. A single, sharp knock, followed by silence. When she opened it, the hallway was empty, but at her feet lay a thin envelope taped shut with surgical tape. Inside was a single page of lab data, authentic Carrington documentation, except the names on it were redacted and one section had been highlighted in neon yellow. It showed abnormal test results dated June 5, 2019, just one day after the mysterious Caspian Protocol note. Someone, somewhere, wanted her to follow this trail. But was it a lead or a trap? That night, Eden couldn't sleep. She ran the data through an AI engine, the kind her father used for research back in the day, and the algorithm flagged a protein sequence tied to experimental genetic therapy. Unregulated, possibly military-funded. And suddenly, the biotech project her father once claimed was too ethical to greenlight took on an entirely new meaning. Had Carrington been involved in something illegal? Had Damien stepped in to cover it up, or to stop it? Nothing added up. Every answer opened two more doors. As Eden was lost in the details, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Natalie. Need to talk. Can't over phone. Meet me. Tonight. It was whether they had all been on the same side once, and she'd never known. And Weiss, maybe she still didn't know whose side she was on. ChatGPT said. The cold voice that echoed through the underground chamber didn't just rattle Eden's nose. It severed something inside her. A quiet thread of denial, maybe. That fragile belief that this was still just a puzzle she could solve. A mystery with a clean edge and a logical finish. But now, as the static pulsed and the lights dimmed, she felt the weight of something far more calculated pressing in. The room responded to her presence. Yes, but not in welcome. More like a trap reacting to a trigger. She wasn't alone. She never had been. And in the silence that followed that cryptic sentence, she could almost hear the walls breathing. Eden backed away from the screen, every muscle tight with instinct. She tried to calm herself, forcing deep breaths, but her mind was already racing. What did a generation too early even mean? Were they expecting someone else, someone related to her? Or was she now in a place that had been sealed off deliberately for reasons beyond her understanding? Her fingers hovered over her phone, desperate to reach out to Milo, but the screen wouldn't unlock. It was frozen, showing only the countdown timer from the surveillance feed, 23 minutes and 11 seconds. Except now, it was ticking backward, and she hadn't started a timer. Suddenly, the heavy steel door slammed shut behind her. The loud clang reverberated through her ribs, sending her panic spiraling into high gear. She sprinted back, slammed her fist against the door, tried the handle. It wouldn't budge. The control pad next to it blinked red. She wasn't locked in by accident. Someone had sealed her in. The room was now humming. Something deeper beneath her feet, like machinery stirring awake after years of slumber. Dust danced in the dim fluorescent lights, and a thin red beam traced across the hallway behind her. Motion sensors. Then, without warning, her phone vibrated violently in her palm. The screen went black, then lit up with a message. You were warned. Now you'll feel what he felt. She didn't need to ask who he was. The image that followed told her everything. Her father, seated in a chair, slumped over, eyes barely open, hooked to wires and tubes in a room that looked almost identical to the one she now stood in. But the date on the corner didn't make sense. April 15th, 2022. 3 months after he'd supposedly died in a lab fire. Eden's throat tightened. Was this real? A sick manipulation? She couldn't tell anymore. Every answer bred more confusion. Every clue deepened the web. And as she spun back toward the humming hallway, one of the screens on the wall flickered back to life. It showed a live feed of her apartment, her kitchen window, ajar. Her cat, Hazel, perched on the sill. And then a shadow moved across the floor. A man in a hood, tall and deliberate, moved through her home with surgical precision. He picked up a photo frame from her bookshelf, one of Eden and her father at the botanical gardens, and stared at it. Then, With slow certainty, he turned to face the camera and pulled down his hood. Milo. But something was wrong. His expression was vacant, eyes glossy, almost drugged or controlled. She didn't recognize this version of him. The man in the video was moving, but he wasn't there. She whispered his name, though he couldn't hear her. 1,000 thoughts flashed through her brain. Was this a setup? Deepfake? Always. Was Milo compromised somehow, sent to keep her close, gain her trust, and lead her into this maze? Her heart warred with her logic. No, Milo wouldn't do this. Not willingly. But if he wasn't making his own decisions anymore, who was pulling the strings? The screen cut to black. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a single word. Decide. Then her signal went completely dead. Eden stood alone, trapped in a facility no one alive remembered, with only fragments of truth slipping through calculated cracks in lies. She slumped to the ground for a second, pulling her knees to her chest, the concrete cold through her jeans. Her mind was spinning faster than she could steady it, and the horror of it all was no longer some dramatic plot twist. It was real, raw, and happening right now. A loud clatter echoed from somewhere deep down the corridor, snapping her to her feet. It sounded metallic, sharp, like a grate slamming down. She crept forward, the walls narrowing, lights blinking overhead in sequence as if guiding, or goading, her deeper. Each step felt heavier. Her breath was shallow. Her mind refused to be still. Was she being studied? Had this entire investigation been part of a plan crafted years before she even knew what questions to ask? Who knew she would follow the trail? Who wanted her to? And then came the moment that tipped the scale entirely. As she turned a corner deeper into the facility, her flashlight beam landed on a shape that made her knees weaken. A person, standing still, not moving, not breathing. It was Natalie, her old contact, the woman who had originally reached out with the encrypted files. Except now, Natalie was propped against the wall like a mannequin, her eyes wide open, unblinking, mouth slightly ajar. Dry blood lined the corner of her lip, and in her hand was a note, clenched tight as if she died fighting to keep it from whoever had done this. Eden reached out, slowly prying the paper from her stiff fingers. There were only 4 words scrawled in a frantic hand. It wasn't Damien. Run. That sentence shattered everything she thought she knew. If Damien wasn't behind this, then who was? And worse, what did they want with her? The corridor lights cut out. The entire hallway plunged into black. And behind her, something began to move. ChatGPT said. The cold voice that echoed through the underground chamber didn't just rattle Eden's nose. It severed something inside her. A quiet thread of denial, maybe, that fragile belief that this was still just a puzzle she could solve, a mystery with a clean edge and a logical finish. But now, as the static pulse and the lights dimmed, she felt the weight of something far more calculated pressing in. The room responded to her presence. Yes, but not in welcome. More like a trap reacting to a trigger. She wasn't alone. She never had been. And in the silence that followed that cryptic sentence, she could almost hear the walls breathing. Eden backed away from the screen, every muscle tight with instinct. She tried to calm herself, forcing deep breaths, but her mind was already racing. What did Generation Too Early even mean? Were they expecting someone else? Someone related to her? Or was she now in a place that had been sealed off deliberately for reasons beyond her understanding? Her fingers hovered over her phone, desperate to reach out to Milo, but the screen wouldn't unlock. It was frozen, showing only the countdown timer from the surveillance feed. 23 minutes and 11 seconds. Except now, it was ticking backward, and she hadn't started a timer. Suddenly, the heavy steel door slammed shut behind her. The loud clang reverberated through her ribs, sending a panic spiraling into high gear. She sprinted back, slammed her fist against the door, tried the handle. It wouldn't budge. The control pad next to it blinked red. She wasn't locked in by accident. Someone had sealed her in. The room was now humming. Something deeper beneath her feet, like machinery stirring awake after years of slumber. Dust danced in the dim fluorescent lights, and a thin red beam traced across the hallway behind her. Motion sensors. Then, without warning, her phone vibrated violently in her palm. The screen went black, then lit up with a message. You were warned. Now you'll feel what he felt. She didn't need to ask who he was. The image that followed told her everything. Her father, seated in a chair, slumped over, eyes barely open, hooked to wires and tubes in a room that looked almost identical to the one she now stood in. But the date on the corner didn't make sense. April 15th, 2022. 3 months after he'd supposedly died in a lab fire. Eden's throat tightened. Was this real? A sick manipulation? She couldn't tell anymore. Every answer bred more confusion, every clue deepened the web. And as she spun back toward the humming hallway, one of the screens on the wall flickered back to life. It showed a live feed of her apartment, her kitchen window, ajar, her cat, Hazel, perched on the sill. And then a shadow moved across the floor. A man in a hood, tall and deliberate, moved through her home with surgical precision. He picked up a photo frame from her bookshelf, one of Eden and her father at the Botanical Gardens, and stared at it. Then, with slow certainty, he turned to face the camera and pulled down his hood. Milo. But something was wrong. His expression was vacant, eyes glossy, almost drugged or controlled. She didn't recognize his version of him. The man in the video was moving, but he wasn't there. She whispered his name, though he couldn't hear her. 1,000 thoughts flashed through her brain. Was this a setup? Deepfake? Or worse, was Milo compromised somehow, sent to keep her close, gain her trust, and lead her into this maze? Her heart warred with her logic. No, Milo wouldn't do this. Not willingly. But if he wasn't making his own decisions anymore, who was pulling the strings? The screen cut to black. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a single word. Decide. Then her signal went completely dead. Eden stood alone, trapped in a facility no one alive remembered, with only fragments of truth slipping through calculated cracks in the lies. She slumped to the ground for a second, pulling her knees to her chest, the concrete cold through her jeans. Her mind was spinning faster than she could steady it, and the horror of it all was no longer some dramatic plot twist. It was real, raw, and happening right now. A loud clatter echoed from somewhere deep down the corridor, snapping her to her feet. It sounded metallic, sharp, like a grate slamming down. She crept forward, the walls narrowing, lights blinking overhead in sequence as if guiding, or goading, her deeper. Each step fell heavier. Her breath was shallow. Her mind refused to be still. Was she being studied? Had this entire investigation been part of a plan crafted years before she even knew what questions to ask? Who knew she would follow the trail? Who wanted her to? And then came the moment that tipped the scale entirely. As she turned a corner deeper into the facility, her flashlight beam landed on a shape that made her knees weaken. A person, standing still, not moving, not breathing. It was Natalie, her old contact, the woman who had originally reached out with the encrypted files. Except now, Natalie was propped against the wall like a mannequin, her eyes wide open, unblinking, mouth slightly ajar. Dry blood lined the corner of her lip, and in her hand was a note, clenched tight as if she died fighting to keep it from whoever had done this. Eden reached out, slowly prying the paper from her stiff fingers. There were only 4 words scrawled in a frantic hand. It wasn't Damien. Run. That sentence shattered everything she thought she knew. If Damien wasn't behind this, then who was? And worse, what did they want with her? The corridor lights cut out. The entire hallway plunged into black. And behind her, something began to move. Eden moved like someone born inside Night Maze. Her body was shaking, but her mind had never felt sharper. Every step she took deeper into the facility, the truth tightened its grip around her throat. The hallways were darker now, the air heavier, as if the building itself knew the story was almost over. Her flashlight flickered, and the backup generator's hum vibrated in her bones. She had Natalie's final message burned into her memory, her phone long dead, and her emotions teetering on the edge of collapse. But she didn't stop, not when the doors closed behind her. Not when she passed cameras tracking her movements, and not when the sound of footsteps began trailing her like an echo from the past. At the center of the compound, there was one last room sealed behind a biometric scanner. It required a retina scan, one she shouldn't have been able to bypass. But when she looked into the lens, it beeped green. The lock clicked, the door opened, and inside was a chamber lined in glass, like a high-security lab, spotless, eerie, humming with dormant machinery. In the center, a chair, and beside it, a figure hunched over a control console. "Damien," she said softly, the word tasting like old metal. He turned slowly, his eyes catching the faint glow of the lab lights. He looked older than she remembered. Not physically, but in presence, in the gravity of guilt. He didn't seem surprised to see her. In fact, it almost looked like he'd been waiting. "I told them not to involve you," he said, his voice lower than it used to be. "But you're your father's daughter after all." Eden's fist clenched, her voice catching. "You lied to me. You lied to everyone." "No," Damien said, standing now. "I protected you. The truth would have destroyed you before you were ready. But you insisted on pulling the thread. So now here we are." Eden stepped closer, scanning the room, noticing what looked like life support monitors dormant against one wall. Tubes. Surgical lights. She'd seen a room like this in the video of her father, but that was just a surface. On a table nearby, she saw a folder. Inside it, blueprints, maps, and DNA reports. Her name was on the cover. She opened it, and her breath caught. She wasn't just being watched. She was being built, modeled, engineered from birth to carry out something. A legacy project. Her hands trembled. "What did you do to me?" Damien stepped into the full light now, his expression hardening. "It wasn't about you. It was about what your father started, and what he couldn't finish. He created a system, Eden, something that could predict outcomes before choices were made. It could rewrite lives. He believed it would eliminate human suffering. But the government didn't want prediction. They wanted control. He refused. They shut him down. So we took the research underground. Eden's mind was unraveling. And you experimented on me. You turned me into a variable in your equation." Damien looked almost mournful. "You were the only one with his genetic map. You were the only one who could process the code he encrypted biologically. Every time you dreamed, your brain was solving problems we couldn't crack in a lifetime. Every message you decrypted was implanted. There were echoes of your own subconscious finally waking up." The room spun. All this time, every clue, every lead, had it all been inside her from the beginning? She didn't know whether to scream or run. But it didn't matter, because Damien turned to the console and pressed something. The wall began to shift, glass panels retracting to reveal a dark hallway behind them. Inside, a capsule, a cryogenic unit. And inside it, her father. Alive. Not dead, not missing, but suspended in stasis. Eden fell back against the table, the air knocked from her lungs. "What is this?" Damien didn't answer. He only watched her, waiting. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "Because he didn't want you to find him unless you were ready. And I couldn't risk losing him again. Not to them." And that's when the final twist hit her like ice water. Behind Damien, the screen flickered to life. Footage from just minutes ago. Milo, awake, alert, speaking into her MIC. "She's in," he was saying, "just like you planned. Initiating shutdown protocol now." Eden's heart slammed into her ribs. Milo wasn't drugged. He wasn't compromised. He was part of it. "Why?" she gasped. But Damien didn't look surprised. He turned slowly to face the screen and whispered, "Because it's not Milo." The screen shifted, showing surveillance footage from 2 years ago. Milo in a hospital bed, machines beeping steadily beside him. The same day he'd told Eden he'd disappeared for a few weeks. But he hadn't gone off the grid for safety. He'd died. The Milo she'd known ever since was someone else. Someone built, grown, designed to keep her moving forward. And suddenly, the countdown she'd seen on her phone made sense. It wasn't counting down to danger. It was counting up to activation. Something inside her, the encrypted map, was being triggered. And unless she stopped it, she'd become part of the system that started all of this. Damien reached into his coat and pulled out a small device. "You have 2 choices," he said, his voice hollow now. "Use this. Shut it down. The facility, the program, everything, even your father's chamber. Or walk away and let it run its course." Either way, you are always a final piece. Eden stared at him, then at the glass tube holding the father she'd mourned for years. Her hands shook violently. The device pulse-read. "Choose," Damien said. But before she could, the lights exploded, gunfire rattled down the hallway, and the entire chamber erupted into chaos. And in that single breathless moment, she still hadn't decided. The blast threw Eden to the ground. But even as the room shook around her and metal screamed against metal, her grip never loosened on the device Damien had handed her. The lab lights blinked violently overhead as the emergency protocol kicked in. Steel doors locking down, systems crashing, alarms wailing through the compound. Smoke clouded her vision, but through the haze, she saw Damien pinned beneath a fallen beam, coughing blood, reaching for her, not with fear, but with a fragile, fading desperation of a man who had gambled everything on a plan far bigger than himself. She crawled across broken glass and wires to reach him, but even before she grasped his hand, she knew he wouldn't make it. His last words were barely audible over the roaring chaos. "Finish it. Free him, or free yourself." And then, silence. She stood. Just her, the chamber, the countdown, and her father's face still visible through the Creo glass, unmoving, yet more alive in that moment than he'd ever been in her memories. The console beside his pod buzzed with 2 final commands: initialize revival or terminate protocol. And in her other hand, the trigger Damien had given her. One press and everything in the facility would be reduced to fire and rubble, the data vaporized, the past buried forever. Her entire journey, every step, every coded message, every betrayal, had led to this impossible choice. No one else could make it for her. She looked down at the folder again, at the record of her own engineered identity, the secret stitched into her DNA, the predictive software that was never really about data, but about control, her control. She had spent her whole life trying to find answers, to connect with a father she never got to know, to feel like she mattered beyond what people had molded her to be. But now she understood. The answers didn't matter if they came at the cost of her humanity. Her father had started this, yes, but he had also tried to protect her from it. His disappearance wasn't abandonment, it was sacrifice. Milo's betrayal, Damien's manipulations, even the strange dreams and clues, they were all meant to bring her to a single point of clarity. She pressed both hands to the console and stared at her reflection. And in that fractured glass, she didn't see a project or a pawn. She saw a person. Tired, scarred, but free. With a deep breath, she entered the command. Not terminate. Not revive. She wiped the drive. The system glitched, then went black. Every light flickered once, then died. The humming stopped. The countdown froze. The facility grew eerily still. She dropped the trigger and stepped back as the emergency override unlocked the back corridor Damien had sealed off long ago. As she walked out of the compound, the rising sun burned through the morning mist like a rebirth. She didn't look back. 3 weeks later, Eden sat at a quiet lake in Vermont, the same place her father used to bring her when she was small. She had nothing left from the past except a single photo she'd salvaged from the ashes, a photo of her father holding her as a baby, laughing, unburdened, human. That's how she would remember him. Not as a genius who tried to outsmart the world, but as a man who'd once held his daughter like the future was something soft and possible. The world moved on. The headlines barely scratched the truth. A lab explosion in upstate New York. No survivors. No records. Just an accident, they said. Another mystery swallowed by silence. But Eden knew better. She walked through the world differently now, not afraid, not hunted, but alive in a way she'd never been. She could still feel shadows watching sometimes, whispers in her dreams, pieces of code dancing in her blood. The system might be gone, but the imprint was hers forever. And then, one rainy night, she got a message. From an untraceable number. Just 3 words. Are you ready? Eden smiled, not with fear, but with understanding. The past might be over, but the future had just begun. And maybe, just maybe, the fairy tale wasn't finished yet.